The New York Giants will try to snap a three-game skid in the Windy City, while the Chicago Bears look to continue their upward trajectory. That and more on today's special crossover edition, Locked On Giants, Locked On Bears, starting right now.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Today's episode of Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Bears, is sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Bears. My name is Patricia Train. I'm the host of Locked On Giants, and I am joined by Joe George, who is the lead host of the Bears Squad Show. And we want to welcome everybody on in, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And Joe, very good to get together with you to discuss this big matchup out in the Midwest.
Yeah, excited about it. The Giants are a fun team this year. I don't want to spoil everything, but I've enjoyed watching Jackson Dart this year, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. And Jackson Dart, really the only reason to watch the Giants these days, because as I said, they are 0-3, or actually they've lost their last three. They have yet to win on the road. Just a big mess for the New York Giants. And we're going to break all that down for you on today's Crossover Thursday. We're going to talk about the key storylines for each team. We're going to talk about the matchups and, of course, the keys to victory. And Joe, let's start off with the Chicago Bears. What's brewing out in the Midwest, the Windy City, in terms of key storylines?
Yeah, I think after, the trade deadline passed and the Bears didn't make any big splashes, they make a really minor move. They lose one of their pass rushers last week, Dio Dangbo, to a torn Achilles. And really, to me, they can't get a pass rush still. And that's still the biggest story of what's going on this season. Yes, last week was awesome. It was a crazy win for the Bears, 47-42 over the Bengals. But I look at this game and I just think, okay, going into this one, you have to at some point get to the quarterback. And they just have really struggled to do that this year. And their secondary has been a weakness as well, periodically throughout the season because of injuries. They're missing their top two corners. So health and getting to the quarterback is a huge problem for the Bears. And that to me feels like it's still the biggest story. And, it feels like one of those matchups where in theory you should be able to get to the quarterback a little bit more in this game. But they haven't done that when we thought it was obvious either early in the season.
Now, the Bears offense, on the other hand, I was just looking that up for an article I was writing. They're a top 10 offense. I mean, what has been the big difference besides obviously Ben Johnson coming in?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with him for sure. Like Ben Johnson, it's just it runs such a different offense. Last week they ran four different trick plays during the game, and normally when the Bears run these trick play or any team runs a trick play, I feel like it's usually out of desperation. Ben Johnson runs them because they're fun. The first one he ran was a double pass that Cole Kmet threw to Roma Dunze that was dropped. He's so creative in what he does offensively, but I think we've really seen the benefit so far of him. And even though it's been up and down for Caleb Williams, we're seeing the benefit of real good coaching for Caleb Williams periodically throughout the year. And, this last game specifically, you see Caleb look a lot more comfortable in the pocket throughout the game, still missing some of the easy throws in that one. But it's just Caleb's development is slowly coming along. And also the other big factor is over the last 4 games, they've become a really, really good running team. D'Andre Swift has been incredible. And then last week, their 7th-round rookie, Kyle Monangai, rushed for 176 yards out of nowhere and was really impressive in his first game as the Bears starting running back when Swift was hurt last week. So it's just it started to click. It's kind of everything that was promised with Ben Johnson has kind of come to fruition so far.
Is there a weakness on that offense that you think can be exploited?
Yeah, left tackle. They're starting an undrafted left tackle, Theo Benedict. He's got good moments. He's gone pretty viral this week for pushing a Bengals player deep into the sidelines and bullying him a little bit. But the offensive line just in general is still a weakness, and especially against the Giants. That's a team that's got a good pass rush and and can get after you. He's got a bunch of names that everyone knows that, can get after the quarterback. But yeah, pass rush for me is the one that I look at. I'm like, or pass blocking. I'm like, it's still not great. And Caleb still at times too, he misses, some of the easier stuff and makes life more challenging for himself. So those to me are the ones that would concern me. And that's why, like, it's, I know we'll get to the deciding matchups, but, protecting the quarterback is going to be a big one this weekend.
Right. Now, from the Giants' perspective, it's still the same roster. The Giants stood pat at the trade deadline. They are really, as I mentioned, they have not won on the road this year. A lot of questions about the coaching and where they go from here. And Brian Daboll, the head coach, every week, we got to be better. We got to play better. We got to coach better. We got to do this better. But no answer so far. So one of the things we're going to be looking for from the Giants' perspective is what changes, if any, will they make to this lineup? I mean, they're carrying Evan Neal on the roster, who has yet to get into a game. He was active last week for the first time, but only because everybody else was banged up and they didn't need to deactivate him. Jalen Hyatt, they've kind of given up on him. Why continue to carry these guys when you can maybe open up a couple roster spots and, I don't know, pull somebody in off the street? At this point, can it be any worse? And then the bigger picture for the Giants that has been really lacking accountability. I hate to say it. I don't want to call it a country club atmosphere, but it's kind of been like that for the Giants. It's like if a guy makes a mistake, it's like, oh, okay, well, here's how you should do it or how it should have been done. There's no accountability. I mean, at this point, your team is spiraling out of control. Bench people if you have to. I mean, the season's over right now anyway. Is it going to get any worse if you pull like a Deontay Banks, who has just been terrible with his effort? Is it going to get any worse if you pull him off and put, I don't know, a practice squad guy on there? So just a lot of turmoil for the New York Giants, a coaching staff and a GM who is really under fire right now. And with each mounting loss, Giants Nation, they get angrier and angrier, and rightfully so. And there just doesn't seem to be any answers in sight. And really the only reason why I think people still stay tuned into this Giants team, Jackson Dart, who brings some moxie to the offense. But unfortunately, that young man can't do it all by himself.
I'm curious your thoughts on, seeing the way Jackson's played this year. And obviously, the Bears last year went through this where Caleb Williams comes in and you've got a coach who's on the hot seat, like Brian Daboll is right now. And, I always want to believe in that philosophy of it's probably better to have a clean slate with the new quarterback and build from there versus after a year or into the first year have to disrupt everything. Where are you at with Daboll at this point in the season? Is he back next year? Is he doing enough to develop Jackson Dart? It doesn't sound like it, but it feels like that a change could be coming, or at least you're hoping it's coming.
I like Brian Daboll as a person. I do not think he's the answer coach. He just, every week, it's the same thing. Nothing gets accomplished. And I think it's an insult, to be honest with you, when people say, well, Jackson Dart needs Brian Daboll. No, that's not necessarily. And look no further than the Bears. Ben Johnson did not draft Caleb Williams. He inherited him. He tapped into what he does well, and he minimized what he doesn't do well. So why can't, if the Giants decide to move on in a different direction, which I believe they will at the end of the season, especially if things keep going the way they are, why can't this team hire a really good offensive mind to come in and continue to tweak a system or develop a system that Jackson Dart can excel in? I mean, let's give the young man some credit. He has worked his tail off. He is, he's got the right attitude. He's a young leader. I think if they had to do a captain's vote all over again, he'd get the C on his chest. But let's not sit here and say, well, Brian Daboll is the only reason why Jackson Dart is successful as he is, because it's not true.
Yeah, it's hard to make that argument. I think, especially when you see what's happening over in Indianapolis this year with Daniel Jones and how well it's going for him. And yeah, they got a playoff victory against the Vikings a couple of years ago, but it's hard to, I think, to ignore that at this point. I've been impressed with Jackson Dart. I think that's where I imagine where you're at right now is where I was at last year with the Bears, where it's like all that really matters is how is Caleb Williams developing last year for me? How is Jackson Dart developing this year for you? It's tough, and it's the one thing that disappoints me about this game is I was hoping to see Scadaboo. I was hoping to see Scadaboo and Neighbors because those guys are awesome. Like they're great players. I love the Giants core that they have, and it's a bummer that we're only going to see one of the three this weekend.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but unfortunately, that's how the game rolls. All right. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about the key matchups. Giants at Chicago Bears this Sunday. Locked on Giants, Locked on Bears. Crossover Thursday. We'll have that for you coming right up. Hey, everybody. You know the saying, look good and feel good? The problem is that most dress clothes only check one of those boxes. They look sharp, but they feel stiff, hot, and are high maintenance. That's why there's Mizzen in Maine. Mizzen in Maine makes classic menswear with performance fabrics, so it's effortless to look sharp and feel comfortable. They invented the performance fabric dress shirt over 10 years ago, and they perfected it ever since. Their shirts are stretchy, moisture wicking, and wrinkle resistant, and machine washable. There's no ironing, no dry cleaning. And their stylish fashions make it easy to go from the office to dinner or even out on the golf course and still feel comfortable all day. Right now, Mizzen in Maine is offering our listeners 20% off their first purchase at mizzeninmaine.com with the promo code LOCKEDONNFL20. That's Mizzen, spelled Mizzen, and Maine, MAIN.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL20 for 20% off. And if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen in Maine stores in select states. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action if you haven't tried it yet. PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least two players' stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. The new Stacks feature is a game changer. You can now pick more on, say, for example, Jackson Dart's passing yards, touchdowns, and rushing yards in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. So go on, download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked on Giants, Locked on Bears. I'm Patricia Traina of Locked on Giants. He is Joe George, and he is the lead host of the Bears Squad Show, and we are breaking down the Giants and Bears matchup coming up this Sunday, Soldier Field in Chicago. And Joe, it's going to be a good old-fashioned battle. I mean, if you go back in history, the Giants and the Bears, two of the oldest teams in the NFL, they used to have some really interesting battles back in the day, but I'm just kind of curious, what do you see as one of the key matchups for this week's game?
I think the first one's going to be what we see, and we'll see who the running backs are for the Bears this weekend. I mean, I think we're all kind of hopeful that D'Andre Swift is going to be able to return to the lineup, but again, rookie Kyle Monangai rushed for 176 yards last week, and kind of Cam Scadaboo light in a little bit, I would say. Like, he's just kind of a bully. Like, if you watch the highlights from the Bengals game, every single time he makes contact with the defender, he's pushing them. He's delivering the blows, not vice versa. I think it's the run game. Like, it's where it starts. At least, the Bears are, I think it's they're fifth in the NFL in rushing yards right now. The Giants, I believe, are second worst in the NFL in rushing yards allowed. So that to me is the one where it really comes down to that. Because as good as Caleb Williams can be at times, he's clearly at his best when Ben Johnson's got this running game going. So I think that's the first one for me that I look at is the Bears rushing attack versus the Giants rushing defense and just how that plays out this weekend. I'm curious what your first one is.
Well, actually, before I give you my
Oh,
first
go
one,
ahead.
just to piggyback off
Yeah.
of that, the Giants' pass rush, which is supposed to be the strength of the team, has kind of been neutralized in part because that run defense has been so bad. So that's a really key matchup. I mean, we talk about it every week, every show I do, every one of these crossovers. It's like, the run defense has got to be there. Because if it's not there and you're giving a team second and third and one and stuff like that, now you can't really unleash the dog, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a big matchup. For me, I'm going to give you, I think, a couple. I'm going to start off with the Bears defensive secondary, the pass defense. They're second, I think, in the league in interceptions. And I think they have 13 with one touchdown. So the Bears, I believe they do a lot of disguising and funky things in the back end. That's going to be a nice challenge for Jackson Dart. Now, Jackson Dart, he's a studier. I'm sure he has been dissecting every inch of the Bears film, but still, that's a tough defensive secondary, I think, to face, and one that I'm curious to see how well, the Giants counter against that, because the Bears, they do all kinds of things. And, quite honestly, the Giants right now, having lost Malik Neighbors for the season, they don't really have a receiver who can win the contested catches. And that is a concern for me. They don't have guys that can get really, decent enough separation. That is a concern for me as well. So I'm going to start there as far as, the key matchups goes. I think, it's going to be a chess game. And I'd like to see how the Giants are going to kind of counter that. And, then you talked about the Bears offensive line and how, you're concerned about that. If the Giants can just stop that run and unleash their pass rushers, that could make all the difference in the world, because Caleb Williams, like any other quarterback on the face of the planet, does not do well when under pressure. So I think if the Giants can pull those two off and play mistake-free football, the Giants, the defensive secondary, I talked about the Bears defensive secondary before. I want to just quick talk about the Giants. Their defensive secondary has been banged up. All right. They've got guys playing there that have no business being on a roster, let alone a starting lineup. And the Giants right now are second in the league in defensive pass interference penalties.
Wow.
They are first in the league in defensive pass interference penalty yardage with 200. All right. They're grabby back there. So that matchup scares me, because if they don't have Paulson Adebo this week, if they don't have Cordell Flott, those are their two starting cornerbacks. Javon Holland, who's a safety, hopefully he makes it back. I think he had a chance last week and they pulled him back at the last minute. I dread that defensive secondary going up against that Bears passing attack.
Yeah, I'll go back to the first one you mentioned, the turnovers. It's been a weird year for the Bears, where sometimes they have very little, and then all of a sudden they play a game and they got 4 turnovers in a game, and they've had multiple of those this season. And last week they forced 3 turnovers, but they still gave up 497 passing yards to Joe Flacco. So it's like they have this good with this bad, and there's been 3 games this year where the turnovers, it's been a really good stat for them in terms of it's positive, but it comes with a negative in a way. And if you look at the Commanders game, the Raiders game, and then this Bengals game, every single possession except for 4 in those 3 games ended in a touchdown or a turnover allowed by the defense. Only 4 punts in those games. They beat the Washington Commanders and the Raiders by 1 point each, and they only allowed those teams to punt 1 time. And the Bengals only punted twice in this last game. So this defense is very it's either you allow a touchdown or a field goal or you get a turnover. So they've been really necessary. It's the reason why they've won these games. And having a veteran coach like Dennis Allen now, after getting fired by the Saints last year as the DC, does provide a really interesting chess match, as you said, for Jackson Dart. He's going to do things. We've seen some veteran safeties like Kevin Byard really make some high IQ plays for the Bears this year and take advantage of quarterbacks like Geno Smith when they're locking in on certain guys. So it'll be an interesting matchup. And even though there's a lot of injuries and like they don't have that separation you talked about, I don't trust it because similar to the Giants defense, the Bears are banged up. They're missing their top two corners, right now, in Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon. And Tyreek Stevenson, came back last week from an injury, but you're also relying on C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's on his fourth team in this calendar year and made his first start with the Bears last week. So it's going to be. I'm with you. Like I feel very similar about the Bears secondary. It's like I don't really trust it out there. And I think the advantage the Bears have in that moment is that their offensive weapons at this point are superior to the Giants on the outside. DJ Moore and these guys and Rome Odunze, they have the advantage a little bit, but I still don't trust them. It doesn't really matter who's playing out there. I don't trust them right now. Jackson Dart's he's gonna get some big plays this weekend. That I can guarantee you. Like it might not win, but he's gonna get one or two big plays against the Bears secondary.
We can only hope in the land of the Giants. But let me ask you this, Joe. I mean, do the Bears do a lot of like fancy stuff with twists and disguise blitzes and all that stuff, or is that just once in a while you see that?
I would say it's more once in a while. Dennis Allen's been really adaptable, I guess is the word I want to use, where he's really changing what he's doing. Feels like every week based on who they're playing and the health of their secondary. The one game they had with Jalen Johnson, they were in much more man coverage, but when he's got corners that he doesn't trust and man, he's been running more zone. It's really been more matchup dependent of what they're facing. And this last week, is I think they tried their best to limit Jamar Chase. They tried to do a lot of bracket coverage against them, and then in terms of blitzing, it's kind of been a mixed bag too. There's been certain games where it's like, man, they're not getting after the quarterback, and Dennis Allen's not bringing the heat. But that's because they've also been susceptible to giving up big runs as well this season. So it's really been up and down and kind of all over the place for what they've done this year. I've appreciated it, watching him, not be, so locked in on what his defense is supposed to be. Like the Bears fans, we would see Matt Eberflus do last year and in previous years. He's really trying to adapt to the health of his team, but it's kind of been all over the place, I would say.
All right. So with that said, we gave you the key matchups. Now we're going to go to key victories in our next segment. You're Locked On Giants, Locked On Bears on Crossover Thursday. We'll be right back. Hey, folks, there's nothing better than being in the stadium for an NFL game surrounded by fans cheering on your favorite team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping up at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why you need to check out Gametime, the app that gives you the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you'll pay. Check out their zone deals. Pick the section, and Gametime will pick the seats, and you'll save big. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets to your favorite events with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Bears. I'm Patricia Trainer, Locked On Giants. He is Joe George. He is the lead host of the Bears Squad Show. And speaking of the squad shows, do check out our respective squad shows. The Giants Squad Show airs on Thursday, 1 o'clock, 1 hour live. And Joe, tell everybody when the Bears Squad Show airs.
Yeah, we do obviously the post-game shows and then 6:15 on Tuesday nights.
All right. And Giants also have a post-game squad show, by the way. All right. In this segment, we're going to take a look at the keys to victory. And Joe, the Giants are going in, according to our friends over at FanDuel, as a 3.5-point underdog. What else is new? The Giants are going to be underdogs until further notice. But what do you see as the Bears' biggest keys to a victory?
I'll tell you, though, it's a lower number than I thought it was going to be.
Me too.
What does Vegas know? Like, what do they know that I don't know? Because I saw that number and I was like, uh-oh, I don't like that. I think the key to to victory for the Bears is to see Caleb Williams have not a performance like last week with 20 receiving yards and 50 rushing yards and 250 passing yards, but another game for 250 passing yards and 2 touchdowns for Caleb Williams this week, and not just for for this part, for this game, but as the Bears do have some playoff hopes right now, is continue that offensive development for him, and you want to see that the back-to-back games of putting together great quarterback play. So that's my first key to victory, and I'd say my second one is those turnovers. You got to get 2 of them in this game, because I don't trust this defense to consistently stop the Giants. So you got to get at least 2 turnovers in this game.
Now, I feel like I'm going to beat a dead horse here, because I say this every single week. Stop the run. This Giants defense, they've got the guys to do it, but the run fits have been bad. The angles have been poor. I mean, you look at the mistakes on film made by the Giants defense, and I would say more than half of them come from the run defense. It's just been really bad. But here's a key that I'm going to give you that I don't think a lot of people are really looking at, and it's kind of outside of the box, and this is on the Giants offensive side of the ball. And that is, the Giants got to go back to 12 personnel. Now, what was interesting is last week against the 49ers, they did not run 12 personnel as much as they had the previous few weeks. 12 personnel has kind of been their answer to dealing with having lost Malik Neighbors. The reason why I don't think they went and used 12 personnel last week was because they did not have tight end Daniel Bellinger in the lineup. He was injured with a neck ailment. Hopefully he is back this week, because look, the Giants did not get Jackson Dart, a playmaker, by the trade deadline. So go back to what worked for him. And 11 personnel last week really wasn't working as well for him as 12 personnel had been working. So I think if the Giants could go back to that, who knows, maybe they can string together some, time-consuming drives, keep the Bears offense off the field, and rack up some points. Because, look, the Giants can score. Their offense is, believe it or not, even though the results aren't there, the offense is better than it was last year, even with the injuries. But they've got to play into their strengths. And last week, I think they got away from that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it is one where you see the injuries and you don't think that like I think Bears fans are like, the Giants offense isn't that good. When you look at it, they are good. The other one I'll throw in there too is that the one thing that can help the Giants that hurt the Bears last week and has hurt the Bears a lot this season. As much as I talked about their secondary so far today, I think the weakest unit on this team collectively on both sides is the special teams unit. They've really struggled this year in various different ways. I mean, Devin Duvernay does not look like the guy that played for the Baltimore Ravens. They don't get great, return yardage from him. Cairo Santos, I think everyone wants him gone, but that's kind of also how we all feel about our kickers. But he has this low line drive kick and had one blocked last week. Also missed a field goal that got called back on a penalty, so it doesn't show that on the box score. But he's been missing kicks on the even inside the 50-yard line. He doesn't have a big leg either. He can't kick more than a 50-yard field goal pretty much, which is shocking in today's NFL. And last week too, the Bengals had a kickoff return touchdown, the first play of the game, and then after the Bears went down and scored, the Bengals then got a kickoff return to the 45-yard line and only had to go another 55 yards for a touchdown and did it easily. So the special teams is a huge weakness, and it doesn't really matter who you're facing at this point, because the Bears they can't stop kickoff return. It's really strange that they can't figure it out, and they're giving these offenses that even when they're struggling, these 40, 50-yard field positions, and it just making it so easy for them. So that's the last one I throw in, because it's also driving me insane.
And that's interesting, because up until maybe a couple weeks ago, the Giants special teams were a strength, underrated strength. Now, the last couple of weeks, I think because of injuries and because they've had to lessen the load of some of their core guys who are needed on offense or defense, the special teams have kind of tapered off a little bit. But hopefully, like I said, if the Giants get back some of these other guys healthy, they can move the core special teamers back and give them the bigger role. I mean, Abdul Carter is a perfect example. He was a guy that they took off special teams for a little while. They put him back on there. Dane Belton, who's been a core special teamer, he's had to start at safety, with Javon Holland out. So, special teams is so tricky. And then, of course, it would help if the Giants got consistent kicking from both their punter, Jamie Gillen, who just every week it just seems like up and down with him. And then, Graham Gano, they brought him back off of IR, but he missed the field goal. He has one job. He doesn't even kick off anymore. You can't have him missing field goals because that's points that you end up losing. So special teams, I'm glad you brought that up because that is an underrated but key battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And no one hates that's the worst part about watching football, I think, is watching a kicker miss a field goal because, man, like it's your only job. Like, you just got to get it through the uprights. And I think, like, last week we were doing our post-game show and we were venting about Cairo Santos. And as I look at my phone, I saw that the Jacksonville Jaguars kicker had hit a 68-yard field goal and set the NFL record. And I was like, the Bears don't have a guy who can't hit a 45-yarder. Jags got guys hitting from 68. Like, what is it? So yeah, it's been a disappointing year especially because it's the one coach that Ben Johnson retained from the previous regime from Matt Eberflus. He kept their special teams coach and Richard Hightower. So having it be that much of a struggle that's been this year has been a huge disappointment for Bears fans.
All right, Joe, before we wrap up this additional crossover Thursday, again, the Giants are 3.5-point underdog as of this recording, according to FanDuel. What's your prediction for Sunday's game?
I think the Bears cover. I don't think it's going to be a big one, though. I think the Giants will do enough to keep this a good game. And Jackson Dart, like, I think he's a special player and will be. I was a big fan of his coming out of college. So I think the Bears win this game 27-20.
All right. I can't pick the Giants until I see better play. I just can't. I mean, fool me once, fool me twice. I was picking them earlier in the year. I can't do it. I'm sorry, Giant fans. It's just not going to happen until I have reason to, till I see reason to think that the Giants are going to be better. I dare say, and I hope I'm wrong here, the Giants are going to lose by 2 scores. There's been that trend on the road this year, as I mentioned at the top of the show. I don't see that trend ending, especially, as the injuries pile up and the uncertainties continue. I mean, these guys, after a while, you could just kind of see the life is being sucked out of them. I hope they find it within them to make it a competitive game. I think some of them will. I don't know if all of them will, but I just can't go with the Giants. I'm sorry, Giant fans, but we'll see how it works out. It should be a good one as always. Like I said, 2 of the oldest NFL franchises squaring off. The Bears have something to fight for. The Giants, well, they're jockeying for a high draft pick in 2026. So we, of course, will bring you everything you need to know on our respective shows, Locked On Giants, Locked On Bears, and then, of course, don't forget Giants Squad Show, the Bears Squad Show. So hope you will check that out. We want to thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Crossover Thursday. For your next listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. For Joe George, I'm Patricia Traina. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on our next respective shows.